Hi, I'm Keith McCullough. Welcome to Real Conversations, where I just had an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Tom Markusik, who's not only the founder, but he's also the CEO of Firefly Space Systems. We talked about rocket science, his company, and a lot that's going on currently in the industry. Firefly is a private aerospace firm based in Austin, Texas, formed in January of 2014. Their primary focus is creating the world's lowest cost light satellite launch vehicle for the underserved small satellite market. Tom has a background in propulsion engineering, having started his career with NASA and the U.S. Air Force. He's a seasoned veteran of the new space industry, working for SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and Blue Origin prior to founding Firefly. Tom, thanks for spending some time with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith.
My first time having a rocket scientist alongside me here in the studio, so I appreciate that.
Any quantum mechanics questions you have?
I was getting into that a little bit, before, just in preparing for questions related to your friend Elon Musk and all that is going on. This is why I really wanted to talk to you. I want to talk about Firefly, but again, a lot of investors now actually engaged in what has been really a cumulative breakout in space investing, but Google taking a 10% stake in SpaceX, and now you have your own company. So I just wanted to get into how you got into this. Like, did you always think you were going to be a space guy?
Yeah, I mean, it may sound a bit cliche, but really as a child, I gravitated toward this. I knew probably since 5th grade that I wanted to be involved in some aspect of space transportation or developing space. Yeah, so my background is after I left high school, I did my formal training in aeronautics and aerospace engineering, eventually working all the way up to a PhD at Princeton in mechanical and aerospace engineering. Went out I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do. I just knew I was really excited about this stuff. So the natural thing was to go, work with NASA. So I worked with the government for 10 years, the Air Force as well, developing systems for them. But most recently, I've been kind of riding the wave of what's called new space, and that is, a commercial approach to space. The most conspicuous of which, you'd mentioned Elon Musk at SpaceX. I had the good fortune of working for SpaceX for 5 years. And I think really SpaceX changed the paradigm that what was once the purview of nations and large aerospace companies is now something that small, scrappy entrepreneurial companies can envision doing. And that's really the genesis of Firefly, is trying to fill a niche in that new space community. And that niche being that launch has always been incredibly expensive and inconvenient. And at Firefly, we're trying to make it inexpensive and very convenient.
Now, if you get into the inexpensive part, I think that's a great way to explain that. Inexpensive and convenient, I mean, there's a big value proposition there, obviously, and there are a lot of dollars getting into that value proposition as a result. But can you characterize like the old $500 million investing in satellites versus what you would characterize as inexpensive? Because I don't think a lot of people know what that actually means.
Yeah, I think the reason a company like Firefly can exist is it's not just because we can build a good rocket. There's something else going on, and that's actually the development of the satellites themselves. And as you mentioned, in the past, satellites have been these, big Battlestar Galactica, $500 million assets, and there were, very few startup companies that could envision, hey, let's go build a $500 million satellite. But what's happened in recent years is, some guys, have started building satellites that are like, $50,000 to build, a few guys in a garage type of thing, building up. And it turns out that these $50,000 type satellites, when deployed in arrays, can generate hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. So now you have a new situation where in the past it was all about building these giant expensive satellites. Now we see many companies coming along that can build small satellites that can do the job of the old satellites, but it opens up the number of businesses that can actually participate dramatically. So enter Firefly. While building satellites is fairly straightforward on a small scale, launching them is not. And there are very few people that have the training and the background to do that.
You're not recommending people try that at home,
no? No, not a good idea. But so I've had the good fortune to have had the education and have learned at NASA and learned at these commercial enterprises that I've worked at, that I was able to start a company to actually bridge that gap between the people that are making these incredible new small satellites and getting them to space.
Well, you have, like, again, you have experience with the Air Force, at NASA. You have these government entities that are too big to move effectively, and then you have these guys that come in and, pardon the pun, but you're making smaller rockets. I mean, you're really thinking about, can you explain your experience or just kind of walk through your experience with Elon and how you worked on that Falcon 1 and how that fits in terms of how Firefly thinks about the space?
Yeah, you know, Elon's an amazing character. You know, I've heard him referred to as the, the Henry Ford of our time, and again, what a privilege and blessing to have gotten to work with him and around him and his organization. You know, I think there are a couple things that major themes that I took away from Elon's personality, and the first is that he envisions the future. He envisions what is going to happen, and from that point forward, to him, that is reality, and there's no deviation from that. You know, any deviation from that is like, contradicting reality. So he sticks to his guns, and even when engineers under him think, maybe this is more challenging than we think could be done, I'm amazed, with the progression from Falcon 1 to the Falcon 9 to servicing the space station, and Elon's ultimate goal that he's talked about of going to Mars. I have no doubt that SpaceX will achieve that. The other wonderful thing about working for Elon is that he tells you what to do, and he trusts you to just go and do it. You don't spend a lot of time on scheduling or budgets or anything like that. He hires people that he trusts that can get the job done. He gives you very clear direction. This is what I need, when I need it, and then you don't have to worry about the resources to do it.
Well,
you just go execute.
That's huge. I mean, because you've worked for a lot of billionaires. I mean, you've worked for Bezos, you've worked with Branson, you've worked obviously with Musk. I mean, is he the most empowering employer that you've ever had before you went independent?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the one thing I've learned is you can tell the success of a technical organization pretty quickly by looking at the technical expertise of the leadership.
Right.
If you go into an environment like SpaceX, where the leadership is very technically astute and has the ability to discern good ideas from bad ideas, it's very different than a bureaucratic system where someone is just perhaps, has a Wharton degree and doesn't understand the technology. So unique among all these organizations that I've worked for, Elon is just very technically sharp and could direct and challenge you on any subject, and I think that's part of the secret of their success.
How do you feel about your team, the team that you've put together now, this cumulative experience that you've had? Now you've been able to wipe the slate clean and do it your way.
I feel good about it. I'm not trying to build another SpaceX. I'm trying to build another SpaceX-like company. So the first thing is, to have the right mission. We're trying to fill this small sat launch gap that exists. The second thing is, as you mentioned, is to have the right people. So we're building a team of like-minded people, trying to create a .com-like atmosphere where we're just focused on getting the job done. Everybody wears different hats. I'm out driving the bulldozer one day, I'm out fundraising the other day. That's actually something that's very enriching about the job, and it's something that actually allows us to draw the top talent. We're seeing a lot of the brightest engineers coming out of school these days gravitating toward new space because the technology is cutting edge, and there's no denying the excitement of the mission. Going to space, what could be more exciting than that?
Yeah, new space for sure, but it's new space in Texas. Maybe not everyone thought of it that way. Can you walk through what you're doing there? I mean, not everyone's completely familiar with Firefly, but again, you literally are, bulldozers, big acreage, there you are, you're in Texas.
Yeah, I've worked on this sort of thing in several different states, and it's no secret that Texas provides a really great business climate, and in particular for doing our type of work, the environmental regulations combined with the business climate and incentives that Texas is putting in place to draw new space companies just made Texas a natural choice. Austin is an incredible city, incredible metropolitan area, and often when you're trying to build a team, it's not too hard to convince people to come work on this kind of stuff. Sometimes it's harder to convince the spouse.
Right.
So when you're recruiting, you're often recruiting the spouse, and Austin, Texas is a place that spouses can find some incredible things to do too. So
Yeah,
it provides
it's a great
environment
spot
for this. Yeah.
Well, congrats on that. Now, how important, you've talked about, and again, a lot of people may or may not understand this, but again, you're going into the small satellite space, but how important is the speed to getting these things in the air for you versus the actual perfection of the product itself?
Yeah, you know, as a startup company, I think the most important thing that our company can do is distinguish ourselves from, you know, the people that talk about doing this from the people that can actually do it. They're two very different crowds. There's a very large crowd of folks that talk about doing this and a very small elite crowd of people that can actually do it. So the means to actually get into that second crowd is not as important as actually getting there. So the technologies that we're employing, the approach we're employing centers around building the simplest vehicle as quickly as we can. Fortunately, building a simple vehicle also satisfies our goal of creating a very low-cost vehicle, so there's actually harmony between those two goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's the concept is getting the data actually in the sky. A lot of people have now conceptualized data because Google said, look, we're in this, so people obviously understand the concept. But again, getting it into the sky at a low-cost price point, how much do you think about the repetition and the delivery of actually executing on that versus what I think most people, when they think about space, they think about this episodic launch, everybody's going to come watch, put on a suit, I don't know what it is.
You're right. So historically, you know, launch has been kind of demand-based. You know, there are these very discrete, unique events, drawing crowds. We want to change that paradigm from a demand-based paradigm to a schedule-based paradigm. So at Firefly, we will have a very regular launch cadence. So call it 2 weeks or every week. You know, we will launch. The train is leaving. You know, you're on the train or you're not on the train. Now that's very different than a demand-based environment, and actually that propagates down to the whole infrastructure of the company. If you want to set up a mass production environment that's very regular, regularly producing something, on the other end you have to have a very regular launch schedule. So that harmonizes with our desire to drive costs down through low-cost production. We must have a very regular launch cadence.
And no one's done this before commercially?
No, no one's done this before commercially, and to be fair, there really hasn't been an opportunity to do it because the satellites were these large, you know, precious assets that were few and far between. But with the advent of the small satellites coming out, there's actually enough demand that we could conceptually launch every week. You know, where they're talking about constellations of thousands of satellites. In theory, you could launch every day and still not keep up with demand. So
launching every day, you'll have more people in Texas watching you, I'm sure. I mean, at the end of the day. Do you have a goal in terms of flights per year that you think is achievable before you get into the crazy stuff?
Yeah, I mean, specifically, we're setting up our production facilities for a launch per week.
One per week?
One per week, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we could grow that and scale that up in the future. Certainly we can be viable with a lower launch rate than that, but we think the demand is there, and that would be actually a quantum step ahead of what's ever been done before. People, literally the most anyone's ever launched is an order of magnitude lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, for people who haven't thought about space, new space, the way that you've articulated it, I think you've given a pretty good sense for how inexpensive it is on relative terms, how the speed and the cadence of this could look. But how about the demand? Do you have to drive demand? Do you have to go to potential customers and say, hey, look, your business could look a lot different if you had me in it?
Yeah, that's part of it, but we're really trying to catch up. I mean, like I said, the big stories that are in the news today are these announcements of constellations of satellites that are being deployed. So, you know, we're coming in at just the right time when the demand is coming up. We're not driving the demand, we're actually satisfying the demand.
Like when you think about the demand, how would you characterize how far-reaching it could be? Because, you know, data in the sky from Google is different potentially than data imaging or map imaging. I don't know, how broad is the scope of customers for this type of product?
Well, I think you just defined it there. They're basically, you know, a couple missions. The acquisition of data about what's going on the Earth, and then the communication aspect of it. And on the communication side, you're talking about nothing less than kind of the democratization of information. You know, you can't
Huge.
stop the signal from the sky, and you think
Yeah.
about where billions of people are, and these assets, these satellites, you know, don't respect international boundaries. They're, you know, allows you to have communication literally with anyone in the world. And you know, there are people, you know, like Facebooks of the world that have really brilliant people that can think of applications for what you could do with that kind of flexibility. And then there are just, you know, bigger global issues. You know, we look at, you know, global warming or climate change as being, you know, such a hot topic, something that's, you know, debated, and it really influences a lot of international policy, and it has huge economic implications. But here's the bottom line from a scientific perspective: what's going on? So we have scientific models for what's going on, but we have very limited data. And any scientist knows, or mathematician knows, that if you have a system of equations and you're kind of guessing the boundary conditions, you may as well just guess the solution. So having satellites in space, a lot of satellites in space, allows us to potentially acquire very high resolution, real-time data about what's going on the surface of the Earth that can be used to actually anchor these models and make the predictive capabilities a lot less debatable.
Is there anything out there that, like, you think about every day that other people, you don't see people talking about in terms of the application of what it is that you're building? Something that's legal.
No, I mean, yeah, there's the free exchange of information, but obviously there's also a lot of money to be made in commerce, in being able to communicate with these people. Do I personally have some grand New World Order scheme? And no, not in mind. I'm focusing on the technology to get the assets to space. And like I said, I think there are some people that are smarter about what to do with that capability at Facebook and the Googles.
Well, I guess, I mean, they have to really, if they put that kind of capital into it and that kind of commitment towards it, I mean, they do have to think about the political challenges, but you have to think about the technical challenges.
Right.
Like, when you think of the top 1, 2, or 3 technical challenges, what do you think about?
As far as the technical challenges, you know, rockets aren't easy. They are machines that you're creating a very high non-equilibrium situation.
Very high.
And you know, you've heard you know, nature abhors a vacuum, but the truth is nature abhors any gradient in anything. It likes everything to be very uniform.
Right, linear.
And a rocket is the antithesis of that. You're creating this highly contained, you know, basically explosion that nature would like to spread all that energy out, you know, very uniformly, and you're trying to contain it. So,
and when you say that, like we talked earlier, but when you go like this, you're actually talking about a turbo that's maybe that big, are you not? Just to give people who don't know the...
Yeah, our rocket, our Firefly Alpha rocket, is 75 feet tall, 6 feet in diameter, and the combustors, or the engines that power it, are about this size. And you know, what's going on inside of those engines is the combustion of propellants at about 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the metals that are containing this energy can only take about 600 to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. So keeping that cool while you have the fires of hell in there is very challenging. And the thing about building these sorts of machines is, you know, nature always has a degree of freedom up her sleeve that you may not have anticipated, and results in, you know, some bad days. So ground testing is incredibly important. That's another thing I've learned at SpaceX, and at Firefly we've invested in a 200-acre dedicated facility in central Texas where we'll work out all the bugs of these things on the ground before we fly them.
Yeah, well, before you fly them, when you want to do that, like that high heat test, I want to be at the far end of the 200 acres.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Rockets are amazing. That, you know, there's more energy in one spot than you ever experience as a human. So when you're around them running, there's something that is just strange. You can feel it in your body as much as you can hear it. So it's a very unique experience.
You ever get scared?
I always stay a healthy distance away. Now, if your next question is, will I ever get on top of one of these things? You know, maybe when my children are grown.
How about on the insurance side of this?
Yeah.
The cost, where the costs have been, You know, again, when you talk about doing, forget one a day, one a week, if you did one a month, I still think that people would have a certain kind of equation in their head on what the insurance policy should be surrounding that.
Yeah, again, I'm the technical expert, but you know, we can appeal to some logic here. You know, when you're launching $500 million assets, and you have to insure that, that's a pretty big chunk of money that an insurance company has to consider. You know, the downside of what could happen there. So your insurance policies could easily be on the order of $100 million. Now, what we're talking about at Firefly is we're launching single-digit million value assets, so much less individual risk per launch. And if we can actually launch ramp up the launch rate to 50 flights a year versus 5 flights a year, you're going to engender a lot more confidence that the next one is going to be successful. So I think this could have transformative effects on insurance as well.
Well, the whole expectation of it, I mean, just in general, I mean, people just don't have a way to contextualize that, I don't think. I mean, how about your customers? Do they think that is still a big risk? Do they, when you say you can do 50 a year or one a week, do they look at you a little funny, or do they think that you can do that?
No, we haven't met any skepticism there. What I hear, and I've never had a bad meeting with Firefly. It's amazing with customers. And if I had these vehicles today, I could be selling them by the bushel. And
really?
And the question that we always get is not how, but when. You know, it's not a question of if we can do it. It's when could we get this as soon as possible.
Well, I mean, that's a good problem to have. You know, you need it now, and if you could have had it yesterday, you would have.
Yeah, it is, but yeah, you certainly wake up with a sense of urgency every day.
Well, that's good. That's a great way to start a company, run a company, so congrats on your start. I think everyone's going to be really excited to follow you going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can find Tom's company, Firefly Space Systems, on Twitter at @Firefly_space. He's Tom Markusik. I'm Keith McCullough. This was A Real Conversation.